I owned an Airbnb property for several years but eventually decided to stop due to the stress of managing it alongside my main job. The advantage of using Airbnb instead of a regular rental was the opportunity to earn much more money, especially when the property was frequently booked. Since our house was located in a popular vacation area, Airbnb seemed like an excellent choice for my wife and me. At first, we were excited, but as more bookings came in, it became more demanding. We had to keep things on track and hire cleaning services between guests, as well as stay on top of messages and emails. Despite these challenges, everything was going smoothly for a couple of years until one time we had what we thought was a young couple renting the house. As usual, I sent them the door code when they arrived, and once they confirmed they were inside and everything was okay, I relaxed for the rest of the day. I should mention that I rarely interacted with guests beyond a couple of texts. They would message me upon arrival and departure, and occasionally ask a question about the house, but that was typically it. However, around 9 p.m., just before I was about to go to bed, I received a text from the young man staying at the house. The message was short, saying he would call me shortly. A minute later, he did. Although I had a bad feeling, his words still took me by surprise. He told me that the water wasn't working in the house. I immediately apologized, though I couldn't understand why that would be the case. Living without water is obviously a major issue, so I promised to take care of it right away. I asked if I could quickly check it out, so I could arrange for someone to fix it in the morning. He agreed and was polite about it. I drove over shortly after, and as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed two cars. This wasn't a huge red flag, but it was strange because they were just a young couple here for one night. So why did they need the cars? I assumed someone else was visiting. Even though that wasn't really allowed, I thought little of it and proceeded. I walked up to the door, knocked, and entered the code to get inside. The house was eerily quiet, and I expected them to be waiting for me, but they were nowhere in sight. I probably should have searched for them first, but I was tired and just wanted to fix the problem. I headed straight for the basement to check the main water valve and make sure there wasn't a leak or flood. Everything seemed fine, but when I fiddled with the valve, I heard the water start flowing again. It had clearly been turned off manually. I stood in the basement for a moment, trying to make sense of why this had happened, when an uneasy feeling started to creep over me. I had no idea where the guests were, and I couldn't shake the thought that they had purposely turned off the water to get me to come over or maybe even get a discount for the trouble. I decided to leave and try calling them back just to be sure. As I walked toward the stairs, I suddenly heard the basement door open, and then multiple footsteps approaching. 3 men appeared at the bottom of the stairs. One of them asked if it was fixed. I recognized his voice as the same young man I had spoken to earlier, but these men were much older than I had expected. I told them the water should be working now, and that it must have just been an issue with the valve tightening. I was trying to stay calm and avoid pointing fingers because the situation was making me feel more and more uncomfortable. The men didn't say anything as I passed them to head upstairs, but just as I got close to the stairs, I noticed a gun shoved in the back of one man's pants. I immediately got a surge of panic and rushed up the stairs, but they didn't follow. I left the house as fast as I could and drove away. When I got home, I woke my wife and told her everything. She convinced me to call the police to check the house out. They weren't the guests we had booked, and things were definitely strange. We waited for about 20 minutes before the officer called to say no one was home, but he might need me to open the door. I gave him the code, and 20 minutes later, he called back saying no one was there. The next day, we discovered the card used for payment had been stolen, and after checking the house, we found that several expensive items were missing. I guess there had never been a young couple at all. The most unsettling part was their plan with the water. Maybe they were trying to get me to waive the charges so they could use the stolen card for a longer stay, or maybe they had intended to rob me at gunpoint. But why didn't they just do it when they had the chance? It's also confusing, and it never made sense to me. After that, I stopped going to the house when guests were there, and a few months later, we gave up on Airbnb and started renting the place out traditionally. Last year, I was on a solo trip to Salt Lake City. I had never taken many vacations and always went with family, so this was the first time I was going away on my own. I know it sounds odd, but I enjoy being by myself. I looked up both hotels and Airbnb listings in the area, and surprisingly, the Airbnbs were nicer and cheaper. However, the more affordable options were farther from the city, but I didn't mind the short drive. I found a cozy, small Airbnb. It was perfect for me, just the right size with a nice kitchen and bedroom. I arrived early Sunday morning and was greeted by the owner, who sent me the door code. I got settled and after a long 10-hour drive, relaxed on the couch. After dozing off, I woke up later and noticed that it was just past 10 p.m. and the TV was still on. I turned it off, got a glass of water, and went to the bedroom, but when I walked from the living room to the kitchen, I felt a cold breeze. I looked over and saw that the front door was wide open. My heart raced as I knew I had locked it earlier. I walked over, closed the door, and listened carefully for any sounds of someone inside. I wasn't the biggest guy, but I'm tall and fit, so unless someone had a weapon, I felt I could handle myself. I grabbed a kitchen knife and quietly checked every room in the house. There was no one there. I texted the homeowner to ask if anyone was supposed to come by, but it was late, so I didn't expect a response right away. I checked all the doors and locked them, then did another sweep of the house. Though more awake now, I was still on edge and decided to go to bed. The next morning, things only got worse. I heard noises from outside my bedroom door and froze. Unsure of what to do, I realized the only person who could have the code was the homeowner, so I briefly thought it was him spying on me, which made me more nervous. I grabbed my phone to call the police but made too much noise. A moment later, I heard someone running away from the door and toward the front of the house. That's when I realized the intruder had been right there the whole time. I dialed 911, but when the police arrived, the person was gone. The homeowner gave me a full refund after proving it wasn't him, and I felt a little better. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of someone entering the house while I was sleeping. It was unsettling to know someone had come in, seeing me asleep, and still left without making any contact. I'll never forget that night, and it's made me wary of staying in Airbnbs alone again.